The story is told about a woman in the city of Vilna a couple of hundred years ago who got married, and shortly after her marriage, her husband left home and disappeared. And no one knew where he went. No one was able to track him down. It wasn't like it is today where people can be tracked down all over the world. He was suddenly gone. And she remained at home as an aguna. She was a chained woman. She couldn't remarry because no one knew if her husband was still alive. He didn't give a get. No one could make any contact with him. And she sat for years, and everyone felt very bad for this woman. All of a sudden, a couple of years had passed, and a man comes to town one day, and he claims to be the husband of this woman. So the woman is startled. She doesn't know. Does she believe this man? After all, she didn't know her husband that well. They were married very shortly. And at the same time, maybe it is him. And so he starts to describe different things about her husband, starts saying different identifying personality traits and characteristics. And people are really mystified as to whether this is the individual or not. So they went to the Vilna Gaon and they said, how are we to know? What should we do? And the Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Yehuda of Vilna, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, said, do the following. Take him to shul. And when you bring him to the shul, make sure that there are some people there who remember this individual. And ask this person who claims to be the husband where he sat in shul. What was his space? What was his place where he sat? His makom kavua. If he's correct, and that was his place, then he's the real husband. But if he's not correct, and people say that's not where the husband sat, then you know that he's just a trickster trying to fool everyone, including this woman. And so they brought the individual to the shul, and sure enough, he chose a place, but the place was incorrect. And so they ran him out of town and said, you're not this woman's husband. And thank God the woman was saved from this individual. So they asked the Vilna Gaon, and they said, how did you know that by checking where he sat in shul, that would be the way that we would be able to tell if he was legitimate, if he was sincere or not? So the Vilna Gaon responded and said that one could tell if a person is a trickster because certain things which are obvious, he would get to know about the individual that he was trying to impersonate. But things which were of a religious nature, that individual wouldn't necessarily have prepared as information to pass himself off as being someone else. And the lesson that we learn from this is that there are certain identifying marks that we have on a religious level that tells other people, identifies to other people who we are, and also identifies for ourselves who we are deep inside of our souls. In this week's parsha, we learn about Yaakov hearing his son Yosef was alive. How did he know it was true? What would make him believe it? After all, his sons told him something in the past which was absolutely contrary to the fact that Yosef would be alive. So the answer is, as Rashi explains to us, the Torah says, that Yaakov saw the agalos, he sees the wagons, which reminded him of the last thing that he was learning with his son Yosef, Egla Arufa. They were learning about a dead body that's found between two cities, and how the leaders of the closest city come and they break the neck of a calf, and a calf is called an Egla. So Egla and Agalos wagons, Yosef was sending a message to his father. Through those Agalos, through those wagons, he was sending a Dvar Torah to his father, telling him that he remembered what they had just learned. That's what Rashi explains. And so when Yaakov hears this, Rav Yaakov Naiman explains the next number of words from Yaakov is Vatchi Ruach Yaakov Aviyam. As soon as he sees the wagons, then all of a sudden there's life put back into Yaakov. Now he believes that Yosef is alive. Why? Because Yosef's identifying factor to his father was his religious commitment, and that was the symbolism that he indeed was really alive. And so, after Hanukkah has left us, we start to ask ourselves, what is our religious commitment? What is the flame that continues to burn in our souls throughout the year? And if we don't have one, then we need to make one, that other people will be able to identify us by, but more importantly, that we'll be able to identify ourselves by. May we be zocheh to search for, find, and identify, and ultimately succeed at growing when it comes to our identifying mark as religious, observant Torah Jews. Thank you for listening, and have a good Shabbos.